Okay, hello everyone. My name is Elena Martinez, and I'll be the technical manager for this session. This session is monitoring food systems with the Food Systems Countdown Initiative and Food Systems Dashboard. We're looking forward to a robust interactive session today. Thank you so much for joining us for ANH Academy Week 2024. Quick reminder that you can find information about all the sessions and recordings later on our website. We'll post the link in the chat shortly. Before we get going, I have a few technical announcements. First, this session will be recorded. We'll post the recording on the ANH Academy website following the conference. You've all been muted as you come into the session, but please introduce yourselves in the chat function. You can let us know your name, where you're calling in from, and what organization you work with. If possible for you, we encourage you to turn on your video during the session. If you have any questions, you can share them in the chat box. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can always post a question in the chat or message me directly, or anyone in the call with ANH Academy in their name can help you out. And finally, we've noticed there's some AI bot note takers joining our sessions this week. For now, we're going to request that you not record the session or take notes with AI bots. We are recording the session and we'll share it later, so you'll have access to all the materials later. So now I'm pleased to pass this over to Christina Sokorenko to get the session started. Thanks so much. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you, Elena, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Christina Sokorenko. I'm here with my colleagues, Rosaline Ramons, Stella Nordhagen, Rebecca McLaren, and Kate Schneider. We are so excited to present the Food Systems Countdown Initiative and Food Systems Dashboard tools for food systems monitoring. The Food Systems Dashboard and the Countdown Initiative embody a dual ambition: to capture the complex realities of food systems, translate vast data into practical and actionable insights for country leaders, decision makers, and stakeholders across different contexts and disciplines. Today, we're going to explore these innovative tools. We'll learn how they can enhance your work. We'll discuss their dual capacity for both big picture insights and more granular deep dives. And we'll see how they combine data from multiple sources, offering a more holistic view of food systems. They allow users to compare components across countries, regions, identify priorities, diagnose challenges, and find possible solutions and actions. Our learning objectives for this session include understanding the Food System Countdown Initiative's selection of 50 indicators and their coverage, using the Food Systems Dashboard to see global data and country profiles exploring up to 300 indicators, but today with a focus on the Countdown Initiative's 50 curated indicators and using these metrics for effective food systems monitoring. So we'll begin by introducing ourselves in the chat. Feel free to drop your name and where you're from. And just in a moment here, we'll kick off a quick introductory poll. And I'll pass it here to my colleague, Rosaline, to start that off. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Christina, and very nice to connect with everyone here. And before we really delve into the tools, we want to kind of hear also from you and connect with each other on a couple of poll questions just to kick us off and also to encourage a very interactive session. So across all the session, feel welcome to put things in the chat, raise your hands, and ask questions along the way. So we'll start with a quick Zoom poll. And I'll ask Elena to put it up.
Thank you, Ro. So now that we've had a little bit of time to get to know everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started with our presentations. We'll have a couple different presentations here in our plenary for you today, and we'll also have a few exercises that will give you a chance to practice navigating the Food Systems Dashboard as well as the Countdown Initiative pages. So I'll go ahead and pass the mic here to Kate Schneider, who will tell you a bit more about the Countdown Initiative, why the group came together, the themes, the architecture of the indicators, and much more. Kate, go right ahead.
Great. Thanks, Christina. And hi, everyone. Nice to see so many people here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can you all see it? Yes. Okay, good. So this is just going to be a brief introduction to the countdown. So this is the Food Systems to 2030 Countdown Initiative, which is a large interdisciplinary multi-institution scientific partnership. And our objective is to monitor global food systems and how they can better do their part in achieving the SDGs and other global goals. As you can see, it has 4 co-chair organizations here, which are the organizations where the 4 co-chairs of this initiative sit. Yeah, I'll tell you more about them in a second. So as most of you are probably aware, we don't have a whole lot of time left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And food systems have an important role to play, and this is really a critical moment. We really need food systems to start changing quickly to be able to achieve those goals. We need indicators that can tell decision makers what they need to do differently in order to steer food systems so that they are doing their part. And make priorities so that we can monitor progress at national and ideally subnational level and know how well we're doing it also as a whole world. Food systems are important, they're critical, they play a role in meeting all 17 sustainable development goals. But actually a lot of the things we need to know about food systems can't really be observed from the indicators directly that have been selected to monitor the sustainable development goals. And so in a sense, monitoring food systems is complementary with the SDGs, but it's not a perfect fit. And so additional indicators are needed in order to be able to steer food systems to do their part in achieving the SDGs, to which they are an essential contributor. In 2021, the world held its first ever Food Systems Summit, put together by the United Nations, and this really focused global attention on food systems. It had the 5 themes that you see here, and it got organized dialogues happening in most countries around the world, and really narrowed people to start thinking about what's the role of food systems, how do they need to change, how are they currently functioning in every country, and how can decision makers set priorities across food systems, which cross sectors and ministries, and need to be thought of from a multi-sectoral perspective. So the summit catalyzed country action. Most countries developed national food system transformation pathways, but what it didn't do was come up with some sort of science-based monitoring system that people agreed on and would implement going forward. And so that was the initial motivation in 2021 for the Food Systems to 2030 Countdown Initiative. And our objective was to fill this monitoring gap with updates every year so that we could give decision makers some actionable evidence to track progress, guide new action, and figure out what needs to happen and how well they're doing in achieving their goals. We set out to complement other monitoring and tracking of related global goals at global and regional scales. So we didn't want to be redundant with things that have already been put together. So SDGs, the Global Nutrition Report, et cetera. We wanted to fill in gaps where those existing indicator frameworks didn't cover food systems adequately to guide decision-making and monitor change. And then we wanted to be able to actually contribute to advancing the science of food systems once we had these data, and to be able to put together analyses that could actually help move the science forward. In 2021, we put out a framing paper, which you see here, which helped us to just articulate how this could be done. So we put together sort of what we call an architecture for an indicator framework to monitor global food systems, but we didn't actually select any indicators in that paper. We established a modification of the existing food system framework, which we use to guide the way in which we set out to group how we were thinking about food systems into an architecture that you could attach indicators to. So this is the food systems framework that we use. It's just a slightly adapted visualization of the high-level panel of experts food systems framework. It's the same framework used on the food systems dashboard that you'll see in a moment. It's just illustrated slightly differently. So this is the architecture that we came up with to reflect the holistic nature of food systems. And so what you see here are basically the categories that we think can adequately, holistically cover food systems from a very high level. What you see at the top level, we call those thematic areas, is the biggest themes that need to be monitored. And then within those, there's sub-themes, which we call indicator domains. And those are the topics within each theme for which we need to find indicators. And so as you can see here, that we have 3 outcomes of food systems in the center: diets, nutrition and health, environment, natural resources and production, and livelihoods, poverty and equity. And then we have 2 cross-cutting themes: governance and resilience. So once we put this architecture together in the framework paper that came out in 2021, we then embarked on a 2-year process to actually pick the indicators. And so in the next slide, I'm going to show you a bit of a flow chart of how we did this. So we are a group of 57 scientists. We've actually grown a bit since the paper that we're talking about today. But we came together to identify and make the final selection, but we were only 57 people, and we wanted to make sure this was a transparent, inclusive, and rigorous process to select these indicators. And so what we did was we started ourselves, our group of 57 authors, and identified the longest possible list that we could come up with of indicators that could fit into this architecture. And at that point, there were at least 2 on that list that didn't have any data, so that helped a little bit. Then we established some screening criteria. So we required that the indicators be feasible to monitor, which meant they have data in the last 10 years, and we can expect some new data before 2030. Coverage for at least 70 countries. That was the threshold that we established, just to be able to pick indicators that could be implemented in a global monitoring system. And then they needed to have a transparent methodology. That helped us kick out some other indicators from our long list, but we were still left with about 100 indicators. And we put those through a screening process where we sent a survey to dozens of other scientists, and we engaged over 550 policy experts and stakeholders in 5 regions around the world in order to evaluate the remaining indicators on the evaluative criteria that you see here. So relevance had to measure something that was relevant for food systems across settings and time periods. It had to implement best practices in its measurement protocols and quality control and any statistical methodologies. It had to be interpretable, so have a clear, in most cases, clear desirable direction of change, and be comparable across time and space and be easily communicated. And then we used this idea of usefulness. We applied that to an indicator at the indicator level. If it really met the first 3 criteria, we could consider it a useful indicator. And at the level of the suite of indicators that we were selecting to measure each indicator domain, they would be considered useful if they were not redundant with each other. They came up with a comprehensive set. So that helped us get to a shorter list, and it also helped us identify gaps from our original list. So as you can see here, we actually added 12 indicators in that process that came through at the recommendation and as an identified gap from these hundreds of additional people that we incorporated into the process of indicator selection. And that led us to a final list of 50 indicators. Now I'm going to be really frustrating to make you wait a little bit longer before you see what those indicators are, because my colleague Stella has a fantastic presentation a little bit later on in our session where she's really going to show you how we make use of these, and she's going to dive in and go deep into what the indicators are. But just to give you a bit of a preview here, you can see just the diets, nutrition, and health indicators. And the thing that we wanted to note here is that although we developed the indicator framework separately from the food systems transformation pathways, once those pathways were analyzed, the results of which kind of started to come out as we were getting towards the end of indicator selection, what we recognized is that the architecture that we had put together maps really closely to the themes and action areas that countries themselves had come up with in the food system transformation pathways, which is really validating that both our indicator framework and country priorities are really narrowing in on the same set of things that we need to be focused on for food systems. We put together the most comprehensive and holistic combination of indicators that are also parsimonious and fit for purpose for this monitoring objective and delivering information that is useful and actionable. But in doing so, we also really recognize there's a bunch of data gaps. And so the ones that we just think it's important to continue to point out are these are data gaps for things where either there's no indicator, or there's an indicator but no data, or an indicator that isn't measured in enough places, or some combination of those where there may be an indicator but it hasn't been implemented in a way that could be measured comparably across countries in the world. On the left here, you see a number that you see 4 gaps that I've sort of put personally, is my opinion, into a bucket of slightly easier to fill. So things like, what's the economic value of food systems? What is the welfare of people who work in food systems, especially outside of agriculture, but in other parts of the value chains, the productivity of agricultural, the non-agricultural parts of agri-food systems, and how can we think about what does policy coherence look like for food systems transformation? On the right are the concepts that I think are a little harder to fill for different reasons. So the true cost of food and food loss and waste, those are things that there's a ton of really good work going on, but it's really difficult to collect the data in order to measure the very useful indicators that have been developed. So food loss and waste are part of the SDGs, but they haven't been collected in very many countries, for example. Budgetary allocations to food systems is really challenging because they're multi-sectoral, they cut across different ministries, and food safety is very hard to measure because it occurs at multiple units of analysis and across different spatial scales, and so it's very hard to measure. Of course, there's a lot of work, there's surveillance systems, but these are things that are just, I think, harder to fill with an indicator that you can measure at the global level. So just to conclude, I hope this was a useful introduction to the Food Systems Countdown Initiative. I want to point out that it's an enormous collaboration. What you see here is the list of authors from our most recent baseline paper, which is the majority of what we're talking about today, but we actually already have our next paper in the works, so stay tuned, that should be coming out soon. And you'll hear more about this today, but this is where you can find us. And I hope that you would be interested to take a look at our baseline report, where we report on these indicators and how we selected the indicators. We've also translated that into a policy report, which is much more readable, and it's been translated, the executive summary has been translated into 6 languages, which you can find all of that on our website right here. And now I will turn it back over to Christina.
Thanks so much, Kate. Now that we've heard a bit about the Food Systems Countdown Initiative, we'll take a closer look at the Food Systems Dashboard. This is a platform that collects food systems data across countries and domains. Rebecca, my colleague, will tell you a bit of the background of the dashboard as a platform and a collaborative effort. She'll take you through the website and show you how to use it and give you a sense of the different tools that are available, the describe, diagnose, and decide features that are embedded in this platform, as well as some of the country workshops and the subnational dashboards available. So I'll hand it on over to Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Christina. I'll share my screen. Everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Great.
Great.
So, as Christina mentioned, my name is Rebecca McLaren. I am at the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. I'm one of the coordinators of the Food Systems Dashboard. Today, I'm going to be giving you a quick overview of the dashboard. There's a lot here, but we'll have some more time in the breakout sessions to look at all of this more closely. And here you can see the Food Systems Dashboard is led by the same 4 organizations leading the Food Systems Countdown Initiative. So to start with, why did we feel the need to create the Food Systems Dashboard? It really came out of seeing the drive for evidence-based decision-making and the importance of using data to make our decisions, but within food systems, seeing that data was very fragmented. Data was siloed in different areas. You would have climate data in a different place than nutrition. people would be needing to go to multiple sources that sometimes were difficult to navigate, especially for anyone with lower data literacy. And we really wanted to create a user-friendly tool that would bring all of that data together in one place. And so that led to us working on the food systems dashboard, started work in 2018, and then launched the food systems dashboard in 2020. And as Christina mentioned, it's has 3 pillars, the 3 Ds: describe, diagnose, and decide. Describe is the data. There are about 300 indicators on the food systems dashboard. They cover all areas of food systems. The second D, diagnose. The food systems dashboard has diagnostics that employ a traffic light system. For each indicator, you can see if it's in the red, yellow, or green, and this is for a subset of 39 of the indicators. We'll take a closer look at this soon. And the third D, decide. The food systems dashboard has evidence-based actions that are focused on improving diets, nutrition, and environment. Here you can see the framework that is adapted from the HLPE framework that Kate mentioned, and that we saw a similar content, but a little bit different visualization for the countdown. And here you can see the drivers that push and pull food systems, the core components of food systems themselves, food supply chains, food environments, and individual factors, leading into food security and diets, and nutrition and health, livelihoods, and environmental outcomes. And you can see that the number of indicators in each area is shown in the boxes on the left, making up the almost 300 indicators on the dashboard. And it ranges on the low end from 17 in individual factors to above 60 for food supply chains and food environments, and over 100 for all of the different outcomes. And these are coming from over 40 different sources, all brought together in one place. The dashboard has a food systems typology. As Rose showed in the introductory questions, each country is classified as one of 5 food system types, and those would be rural and traditional, informal and expanding, emerging and diversifying, modernizing and formalizing, and industrialized and consolidated. And that can be shown as one of the indicators on the dashboard. And you can see the most recent from 2021 and going back to 2017. You can see how countries' classifications have changed. 4 indicators were used for determining the food system type: agricultural value added per worker, share of dietary energy from cereals, roots, and tubers, number of supermarkets per 100,000 people, and percent urban population. A lot more information on these methods can be found in the publication shown here, which is available in the dashboard's resources. The dashboard information pages also have longer descriptions of each one of these food system types that you can view. Now let's look at the global data section on the dashboard. And this is where you would explore the data for all 300 of those indicators. You can view the data here in a few different ways. The map form allows you to make comparisons across countries. You can view as a bar graph, which allows you to easily see relative rankings and gaps between countries, and as well as a table, which can be used in much a similar way. You can also view time trends when these are available. Here we're looking at the map view, and you can see on the left there's a menu organized by the different areas of food systems that we looked at in the framework. So you can browse indicators through the menu, or if you know a specific indicator name, you can search for that indicator. And you view it on the map here, where you can select which year you're interested in. You can press play at the top in order to have it play through all of the different years for that indicator. You can filter the indicators, and on the dashboard, we have a filter for the Food Systems Countdown Initiative. And this makes it so that you would just see those 50 FSCI indicators that Kate discussed how they were chosen, and Stella will discuss which those indicators are in more detail. But when you select that filter, you would see all 50 of those indicators in the menu. And each of those indicators is tagged, as you see here, for agri-food systems greenhouse gas emissions. It has a blue FSCI bubble next to it to indicate it's a Food Systems Countdown Initiative indicator. Here we're looking at the bar graph view. And in this view, you can select which countries or regions you want to show to customize the visualization. You can use this to see the rankings across countries. You can then, if there's multiple years available, such as in this view, you can select multiple or all years to see the time trends. So here you'd be able to see the time trends for that same indicator, looking at availability of vegetables for right now. And the same customizable view where you add regions and countries. Now let's look at how you can view data at the country level. So for each country, there's 2 main views available, and some countries also have a third additional option as well. But first, we're going to take a look at the FSD country profiles and the FSCI indicators pages available for each country. So the Food Systems Dashboard country profiles, both of these views would show a subset of indicators, and there is some overlap on which indicators are there. The FSD country profiles includes the diagnostics, which is the traffic light system for those 39 indicators. Here we're looking at the country profile for Tanzania, where you can see this is the view when you first get to the profile. You can add whether you'd like to compare the country to the region and the world averages. And you can see the diagnostics on the left side of the screen. This is a view of the full view of the diagnostics, where you can see all the indicators that would be in the red, which ones are in the yellow, and which ones are in the green. The red indicating a likely challenge area, the yellow a potential challenge area, and the green an unlikely challenge area or a success area. These are based on globally agreed upon thresholds or recommendations when they're available, but that was in the minority of indicators. For most indicators, those were not available, and the team used the international distribution of the data to set these thresholds. There's a lot more information about these methods in the publication listed at the bottom, and that publication can be accessed through the dashboard's resources pages. On the country profiles for all these diagnostic indicators in the visualization, you can view with these thresholds shown. So you can see, for example, for Tanzania here, they may be in the yellow for both of these indicators, but for supply of fruit, they're in the yellow very close to the green, whereas supply of vegetables, they'd be in the yellow much closer to the red. So that really lets you see how a country is doing relative to those thresholds, as well as the time trends there as well. Next, looking at the FSCI indicators pages, these just launched, and these show the 50 FSCI indicators that Stella will talk about in more detail. But you can see they're organized by the 5 countdown themes. We have diets, nutrition, and health, livelihoods, poverty, and equity, environment, natural resources, and production, governance, and resilience. All of the indicators for those themes are shown. This is looking at, so it's shown for each country, and the country's value is shown in the yellow dot, and you can compare either to regional or income group means. Here we're looking at region, so you can see there is in grayscale, the darker dot is the region, and then the lighter is the world. And this is standardized, so to the right is always more desirable, to the left is always less desirable. So it allows you to quickly look and see when the yellow dot is to the right, the country is doing better than the regional and global averages. You can quickly see where that yellow dot is comparatively, if it's to the right or to the left. And there's short descriptions of each indicator that are available in an expanded view here if you click the little triangle or the printable page icon at the top. And you can also click the globe icon to go to that indicator in the global data section to see it in more detail. The dashboard has a policies and actions page. So right now this includes 87 actions coming from work led by Corinna Hawks, and about half of them are focused on diets and nutrition and half on environment. You can read through all the details of each action, and some of these actions are included on each of the country profiles matched to the diagnostics. So when a diagnostic indicator is in the red, it's paired with a subset of these actions. For some countries, there are subnational dashboards that can be viewed. Currently, these are available in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Kenya, Mozambique, Nigeria, and Pakistan. And work is underway right now for these dashboards in India and Rwanda. On these dashboards, you can see data at subnational level, so by state, province, or division. And in some cases, you can see another subnational level down, such as municipalities, districts, and regencies. There is a country data page similar to the global data on the global dashboard, where you can compare data across all of the states and provinces. And then there's also a state or province profile where you can view all of the indicators visualized for that state. And we've been doing work on workshops across different countries where we've been presenting the dashboard and subnational dashboards where available. And these have taken place so far in Pakistan, Kenya, and Rwanda, with Tanzania upcoming. We're starting work on a Tanzania subnational dashboard soon, but have not yet begun that yet. And more countries, workshops to follow the rest of this year and next year as well. So thank you very much. And we'll have time to go a lot more in detail to all of these different views in the dashboard when we do our breakout rooms. And I will pass it back to Christina.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and get going with our breakout room activity. This is going to give you a chance to explore some of the indicators that my colleagues mentioned and get familiar with the data under the different themes of the Food Systems Countdown Initiative. I'll give you some instructions and a quick demo of the activity, and then we'll break into groups. And you can select your group of interest for this activity. So once the breakout rooms are set up, feel free to click on the one that interests you the most. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. And Elena, let me know if you see it.
Yes, I see your screen.
Thanks so much. So for this activity, everyone will pick their theme of interests. And what you'll do is head to the Food Systems Countdown Initiative to get a closer look at these themes. You'll identify what the main indicators are under each theme, what were the indicators chosen to represent this theme, and then you'll also head to the Food Systems dashboard to look at the patterns across countries and regions, as well as trends across time. So what are these themes? We have diets, nutrition, and health, environment, natural resources, and production, livelihoods, poverty and equity, governance, and resilience. Each theme has been divided into several domains with selected indicators. In total, about 50 indicators were curated through a collaborative process involving over 70 scientists and researchers. And this harmonized data offers a baseline assessment of global food systems, showing that while every country excels in some areas, none rank highest across all domains. So in this activity, we're going to dive into these indicators. Again, you'll select your theme of choice by clicking on the breakout room that you want to join. And then you'll head to the Food Systems Countdown Initiative website to find your theme. We recommend that one person in the group volunteers to share their screen so that the rest of the group members can follow along and co-lead an active discussion. We hope that you have time to discuss many different things, but the main goal of this is really just to explore. What are these indicators? What patterns do you notice? Do you see patterns across countries, globally? Do you see them in different regions, income groups? At the end of your discussion, nominate one person in your group who will report back to the plenary. We'll all jump back into the larger group and spend a few minutes debriefing, discussing, and sharing what we learned. What stood out to you the most? What kind of lessons did you draw from this 15-minute activity? And what questions were you left with? As we like to say, good data should raise questions. Now, I'll quickly show you what this platform looks like and how you can navigate it most effectively. And you'll get a link to these instructions before we kick off into the groups. So once you head to the Food Systems Countdown Initiative website, you'll land on this page of indicator architecture. Depending on the theme that you've chosen, you'll click on it, and it will send you to the different domains within the theme. You can click on one of these indicators, and that will take you to the Food Systems dashboard. And here you can explore global data. You can look at it in different views, graphs, tables. And you can also click on this FSCI button in the Food Systems dashboard that will take you to the other indicators within your theme. So if I've chosen livelihoods, poverty, and equity, I can check out the other indicators that have been curated to represent this theme. And I can also look at different country profiles, explore the different functionalities available on this website. So I'll stop sharing my screen there. And what I'll do is I'll paste the activity instructions as well as the FSCI link into the chat. But don't worry if you don't have a chance to catch that. Once you jump into the activity, one of us here will join you as well, and we'll make sure that you have those links at your fingertips. Okay, so wonderful. We'll just wait a few minutes here for everyone to trickle back in. Great. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a chance to dive into some of these indicators and familiarize yourself with them. I saw many of you clicking around in the dashboard, and I hope that you were able to discover data that you didn't even know existed. Maybe you even found some gaps that surprised you. So now we want to hear from you. What stood out the most? What did you learn from this? What was helpful or maybe even a bit confusing? And did this short session broaden your understanding of monitoring global food systems and what's involved in that? Let's kick things off by hearing from the nominees of each group. And remember, you can feel free to use the chat function to ask us any questions you might have or any challenges you might have encountered in navigating the dashboard. So who would like to start off our discussion? Does anyone want to go first?
I don't mind starting. Can you hear me?
Yep, indeed.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so just a few comments to start off with. Some of the questions that we had included differences between this dashboard and the other one. I think it's the TOPS one. And yeah, so basically, of course, this one focuses on the themes for the countdown. And then there's some similarities between indicators. So that was all interesting to compare. Another thing that we noted going through some of the indicators was that some of them could be repeated between our 5 categories. So Rebecca mentioned a few of those, and of course, some of them are also repeated in the outcomes or the drivers, is what I understood. Also, one of our group members noted that some data is lacking for some of the high income countries. Like I think our example was social protection adequacy. So, and of course, there's differences in what data different countries collect. So of course, high income countries don't always collect the same indicators as most of the lower income countries. Yeah, and Rebecca was very helpful mentioning like some of the categories have more indicators than others because they've been added more recently. I think she's mentioned that environment was added in 2021, so a year later. So yeah, I think we had fun going through, trying to explore as much as we could, and certainly with great guidance from Rebecca. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I see Julia volunteered to go next. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Christina. So while we were in the nutrition and diets group, DIM, and what we started looking for was for the availability of fruits and vegetables, and we saw a clear pattern on greater availability of fruits and vegetables per capita in developed economies, and generally in the global north. And then we compared this with the availability of energy per capita, and we saw that there was darker colors for energy availability, which means greater availability of such energy in comparison with the availability of fruits and vegetables. And we were wondering whether this was a reflection on of greater access to high energy, low nutrient dense foods. So what we did here, well, thanks to the great guidance from Estela, was to see what was the share of energy coming from staple foods. And here was also really interesting to see countries such as Congo, where I don't remember the percentage, but there was a really high percentage of the energy coming from staple foods, therefore probably lacking these sources of micronutrients in comparison to other countries such as the States. And then we also check another indicator that was related to the retail value of ultra-processed foods, in order to also reflect on this availability of low nutrient-dense foods. And we saw well, some challenges, perhaps we would say, on the availability, on the data availability, because as one of our colleagues was saying that in Asia there was the sales of ultra-processed foods was zero. So probably this is because there is this difficulties in reporting the data concerning ultra-processed foods. Yeah, and I think this is everything, I hope.
Great. Thank you so much. Who wants to go next?
It was.
Yeah, I can go next. I was in the resilience group with a few other folks, and yeah, I don't know. I personally, I have very little experience in that, and it seems that other people also didn't really know so much about resilience indicators. So we were quite interested about the indicator itself. So one was, for example, the ratio of total damages of all disasters to the GDP. And we were quite confused also about like looking at the scale. So first of all, it seems as if there was not much data for all these countries. A lot of countries were had the kind of like the whitish color shade, and we were not quite sure if that means it was zero value or not, like no data. Also, we noticed our scale went from 0 to 0, so we're also not quite sure what that means. Yeah, so yeah, but it was interesting. We used the time kind of the time machine kind of play button to see how the changes happened there. We had a second indicator about dietary sourcing flexibility index, and we checked also the definition there, which was looking at like, the different types of sources that a country would get kind of food, and yeah, we drew the conclusion that the more sources you have, then the more flexible you are. And again, we use the time kind of button there to see how things changed, and yeah, try to kind of understand a little bit patterns, but I think we didn't actually get to that part too much. And then the third indicator out of a good number of indicators that we managed to look at was mobile cellular subscriptions, which was used as a proxy indicator for infrastructure. And there was also, there was much more data available, so there was more kind of interesting also to see maybe some patterns. And a couple of countries who, I don't know, even had more than one mobile phone per person on average. And yeah, so there were some conclusions we could draw. I think in terms of real big patterns we saw with that first one, the disaster damage to the GDP ratio, we saw that many of the African countries were not kind of colored, and were really wondering if that is lack of data or if the value is just kind of, I don't know, on the kind of like white color end there. yeah, but I don't know if the other colleagues from the group have anything to add.
No, we're good. Thank you, Gudrun. Okay, and just a couple more themes to share on here. I think we have governance and one more, livelihoods. I
Environment.
believe. Oh, environment. Thanks.
I'll go for the environment.
Does anyone from environment want to go?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect.
So I think we looked at sort of the natural habitat and the maintenance of natural habitat, and particularly around the country of Sudan, and how that then compared with both the North African and global data, which it was very comparable, if not better than. And I think we did a bit of looking around and just familiarizing ourselves with the whole dashboard, because I think for me there's an awful lot of information. And I think for particularly the habitat, the thing that we noted as well was the fact it was quite old, so it's from 2015, and just thinking to be able to update an awful lot of information, just on different countries, and I think it's an amazing tool, I think, just to be able to explore and look into more. I don't know if anybody else from my group had anything to add.
And maybe a quick word from those in the governance group, and then we'll move on.
The governance group was quite small, so and I think that the person who was kind of leading us had to leave. They put in the chat, but we spent a lot of time trying to understand a little bit more about the food safety indicator. We talked about the food system transformation pathways and trying to kind of interpret what it means to have a pathway or not. And I think that was about it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all the insights, and also for raising some of the challenges that you encountered on the site. This is really useful feedback for us. So we're really excited to hear that you found so much on these platforms and that lots of it was helpful, but please don't hesitate to give us constructive feedback moving forward, either when we share back or in the chat. This is really rich and fantastic. So we'll go ahead and move on. We'll have Stella Nordhagen up next, giving a presentation on how the Food Systems Countdown Initiative can be used for food systems monitoring. What does it mean to organize surveillance efforts and really leverage these findings for decision-making, targeted interventions, programmatic planning, and more. Go right ahead. I will.
Okay, great. Hope everybody can see my screen now. So at this point, we've gotten the introduction to what is the Food Systems Countdown Initiative and maybe seen a little bit of the data, but now we'll get into a bit about how might we actually use it. So I know everybody, you can't see my screen, just to check, right? Yep, okay, great.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So I know everybody had some opportunity in the past session to maybe look at one theme and a few indicators within that theme, but you might not have really kind of seen the full breadth of the indicators. So I wanted to give just a sample of, this is 12 out of the 50 across all 5 of the FSCI themes, to give you an idea of the diversity of indicators that are included here. So under diets, nutrition, and health, we look at indicators that have to do with food environments, such as the population that can't afford a healthy diet. But we also look at things related to diet quality, such as sugar-sweetened soft drink consumption. What share of adults are eating those soft drinks that we know are not very healthy on the prior day, as well as some outcomes, such as the prevalence of undernourishment. That's the percentage of the population that goes hungry. And then within environment, we have a really diverse set of indicators that try and get across multiple dimensions of environmental impacts of food systems and kind of the environmental health of food systems, looking beyond some of the usual suspects like greenhouse gas emissions. So we have an indicator that looks at the functioning of agricultural ecosystems. Basically, do you have enough agricultural land area there that has a natural or semi-natural habitat that you can have enough biodiversity to maintain a really functioning ecosystem to support your agricultural needs? We look at the fisheries health index. So a lot of times when we think about food systems, we forget about the fish. We think about the stuff that's on land, but we include an indicator here that summarizes kind of the overall availability and sustainability of fish from an environmental perspective. And then we have a few indicators for specific food commodities that look at what's called the greenhouse gas emissions intensity. So what that is, it's not the overall amount of greenhouse gas emissions from a food system, but instead it looks at, for a particular food type, how many greenhouse gases did you need to emit? What volume of greenhouse gases did you need to emit to produce a given unit of that food? So if you're producing, a kilogram of wheat and releasing a whole bunch of greenhouse gases to do that relative to another country that can produce that same amount of wheat with a much smaller level of emissions, that suggests that there's an important shift that can be made there to make your food system more efficient and reduce greenhouse gas emissions without necessarily reducing the level of production. In livelihoods, poverty, and equity, 3 indicators I've highlighted here is child labor, which is not specific to food systems, but a large share of child labor does come from agriculture, so it's a really important thing to understand. We look at the share of land that's held by women to understand gender equity within food systems. And we look at social protection and how adequately it meets the needs of households, because we know that social protection is really important for everybody's access to food, but particularly for a lot of people who work within food systems and maybe don't necessarily make a great wage and need those social protections in place. Within governance, as mentioned in the breakout session, some of the food safety capacity indicators that we're looking at. We also have indicators related to health-related food taxes. So does the government have in place any taxes on unhealthy foods? And then the legal recognition of the right to food. And then within resilience, we talked a little bit, I think, about some of the coping strategies that certain countries can use to deal with food insecurity. We're also looking at things like the diversity of genetic resources for agriculture in terms of plants and animals that have been conserved, so that you have kind of that option value in the future to be able to adapt your food system. And we also look at social capital, understanding that when people are in a difficult situation and need to be resilient to some kind of a shock, being able to rely on others within society can be a really important way to boost their resilience. So that's just a sample to give you an idea of kind of the diversity of indicators that are included within the FSCI. Now to talk a little bit about the outputs that you can get from that. So Kate mentioned this really briefly in her presentation. I just wanted to highlight in a bit more detail. We have a peer-reviewed paper for the scientific crowd that was published in December. And it has supplemental information that gives kind of all the data and a lot of analytic detail. But then based on that, we developed a policy report that's more for a general audience. And then we also came up with 2-page summaries in 6 languages. So you can see the Arabic one on the screen here. So those can be useful if maybe you're talking to a policy audience about food systems and you want to just have, here's what you need to know in 2 pages. And then, of course, all the indicators for all countries are available on the food systems dashboard, which we've been talking about. So there's a lot of different output types and a lot of different indicators. But how might we actually use this data? What are some of the use cases? So I'm just going to walk you through 3 different potential use cases you might consider, and I'm sure there are others. But first, let's talk about setting global and regional priorities for food systems transformation. So let's imagine, say, I'm a donor. Lucky me. And I am interested in supporting food system transformation in low and middle income countries, but I'm really new to this space. I know food systems are important, but I don't know that much about what are the challenges that low and middle income countries face in this space and what specifically should my program support. So a really nice source for looking at the food systems countdown indicators in terms of making comparisons across income groups or across regions is the data that we put out in our policy report. And you can see here this visualization. It looks at differences across different income groups. So the lighter colors are lower income countries up to the darkest colors being high income countries. And this graph is normalized in a way so that that bar down the middle is the global average, and things that show to the left are less desirable for that particular indicator. So not necessarily lower, but less desirable in whichever direction for that indicator is considered less good, basically. And those on the right-hand side are more desirable. So if I look here, I can see some of kind of the trends that we might expect. So if I zoom in to say the first section, which is diets, nutrition, and health indicators, and I look, I can see that in general, for most of these indicators, the light colors, so those low income countries, tend to be doing in the less desirable direction. So they're all over on the left side. But there's a few where that's not the case. One of those is kind of soft drink consumption. Another is that ultra processed food sales indicator we talked about before. And related to that, there's an indicator for what's called NCD risk. So kind of the overall dietary factors that put one at risk for non-communicable diseases. So those are all areas where maybe if I'm trying to focus on improving diet quality in low and middle income countries, I don't focus on those so much, and instead I look at the areas where those countries are underperforming, such as dietary diversity or ability to afford a healthy diet. So another way that we can look at the data is a similar visualization, but this time looking at regional patterns in the countdown indicators. So here again, these graphs are standardized to kind of the global mean, and those where the bar is sticking out to the left-hand side indicates that the country is, or that, sorry, the region is doing not as well as the global average for that particular indicator, whereas those sticking out to the right indicate that that region is outperforming relative to the global average for that indicator. So let's say as the donor, again, I'm not interested just in low and middle income countries, but I'm also going to work in both South Asia and Africa, and I want to understand what should I focus on that's different between those two regions. So sub-Saharan Africa is shown in that kind of dark purple bar, which is at the top of these graphs on the top row, and South Asia is the dark blue right below it. And you can see that if I'm thinking of this from a diets, nutrition, and health perspective, well, those two bars, they're kind of together everywhere, right? They kind of track one another. So they might not be doing exactly the same, but in general, they have similar challenges, those two regions, within the diets, nutrition, and health space. But then if I go to the bottom panel of this graph, which is looking at the environment, natural resources, and production indicators, what I see is that it's actually really different between those two indicators, right? So in some cases, that blue bar is doing pretty well. So for example, for pesticides use, both South Asia and Southern Saharan Africa are both doing pretty well. But then if we look at something like emissions intensity for beef, we sub-Saharan Africa is really underperforming relative to the global average, whereas South Asia is just about on that global average. In contrast, for agricultural ecosystems function, South Asia is really underperforming relative to all other regions, whereas Sub-Saharan Africa is actually doing slightly better than the regional average. So I think what the data highlight when you look at it this way is that no country, no region is doing well across all of the different indicators that the Food Systems Countdown Initiative tracks. And there's some important variances that appear across different types of indicators, across regions, even within the same theme, that can really help to get a more nuanced picture of what are the big priority issues for food system transformation. So moving on to kind of a second use case, this is for global monitoring of food systems over time. So kind of how are we doing in achieving our food systems goals? Now for this use case, let's imagine instead of that donor, I am somebody who really cares about advocating for a particular food systems issue or food systems topic. Let's say vegetables. I'm a vegetable scientist and I think everybody should have more vegetables and I want more vegetables out there in the world. How might I look at some data from the Food Systems Countdown to understand how well the world is doing in terms of making sure everybody has access to more vegetables? So from the homepage of the dashboard, I can come down here, FSCI, click on the data for the FSCI and the Food Systems Dashboard. I'll see all the indicators, and I can see under Diets, Nutrition, and Health, I have this indicator for availability of vegetables. I click on that, and that'll take me to this nice visualization that gives me an idea of, vegetable availability all around the world. And this is in grams per person per day. But what I'm interested in is not just understanding how does it vary across the world, but also how are we doing over time? Are we actually increasing availability of vegetables? So what I can do is select at the top here on this timeline, all those different years of data that are available. And that will give me this nice kind of time trend graph where I've selected a handful of different world regions to be able to compare over time their availability of vegetables. And what I can see here is, yeah, there's a huge difference across regions in terms of availability of vegetables, but also we see some regions are actually doing really well in terms of increasing vegetable availability in the past decade. So both East Asia and particularly Southern Europe have done really well in the past few years at increasing vegetable availability. Whereas in contrast, I look at North America, South America, and Southern Africa, lower levels, but also not much growth. So this gives me an idea of kind of how are we performing overall in terms of vegetable availability, but also gives me the idea that maybe there are some lessons that I can take from some of those regions that are doing well in increasing vegetable availability over time, and use that to inform strategies that we might use in some of the other regions that haven't seen that kind of growth. So final use case to highlight is thinking now, not at that global level, not about kind of comparing across countries or regions, but instead at the national level. So what if I am a food systems expert who advises the government on food systems policy in a particular country? How might I use this data? So in this case, what we would do is we would go to the dashboard and select the country profiles, which will then give you an option to look at the FSCI data, and you click on that, and that will take you to a country profile like this. So in this case, I am from Kazakhstan. I am a policy advisor in Kazakhstan, and I am interested in understanding what are our main food system challenges within the country and how should we prioritize our policy initiatives. So as Rebecca mentioned earlier in this visualization, you can see the country that I'm interested in this case, Kazakhstan, in that yellow dot. And then it compares to the region, Central Asia in the blue dot, and the world in that kind of light gray blue dot. And once again, these graphs are normalized so that everything to the left is less desirable, everything to the right is more desirable. And this gives a really handy way to compare in an instant, in a snapshot, how well a given country is doing relative to its region and the world. So if I look at Kazakhstan and I look at the diets, nutrition, and health, I can see that yellow dot, it's all the way out to the right, to kind of that most desirable direction, actually for a large number of indicators when it comes to food insecurity, population that can't afford a healthy diet, minimum dietary diversity for women. We're doing really well, actually. Like, this is a pretty good picture. But there's a few indicators where we're doing a lot worse. So one of those, which I can highlight, is one where we're all the way over at the left side of the scale, the least desirable direction. And that's that indicator for dietary factors that put one at risk of non-communicable diseases. So NCD risk, second from the bottom in that diets, nutrition, health area. So that's one where if I'm a policymaker here and I want to hone in on what should I really focus on when it comes to diets, nutrition, and health, that might be an area where I want to put most of my focus. And you could go through a similar exercise for the governance indicators, but I won't because I want to save time for us to do those exercises in the breakout rooms. But I hope I've given a nice kind of really quick orientation and snapshot to some of the ways in which people might use the FSCI to make decisions, to guide decisions in their work. These can be used for setting global and regional priorities for food system transformation, for monitoring progress towards those goals across countries, and also for focusing in at the country level to understand particular country level priorities and inform national level food systems monitoring systems, which is what we're going to do in our next breakout room exercise. So I will hand back to Christina to take us into that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stella. So for our next exercise, what we're going to do is look at countries. I know a few of you may have had time to click around in the country profiles in the last exercise, but here in our next breakout room, we're going to dive deep into country pages, different ways of looking at food systems performance and national indicators. So I'll give you a brief overview of what we'll do, and then we'll just split evenly into 5 groups. We'll randomize for this one, and one of us will be in there with you to facilitate the discussion, but actually we'll actually try to stay out of your way there. We'll just be backstopping and supporting if you need us. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And Elena, let me know when you can see it.
It looks great.
Thank you. So today we're going to be looking at a few different countries. We tried to pick countries in different parts of the world and also across income status. So we've got Mexico, Switzerland, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Bangladesh. And what we'll do when we explore the country pages for these 5 countries is we're going to try and identify challenge area, a place where the food systems are maybe not performing as well as they could, or some challenge areas that you spot, as well as a success area. In addition to that, if there's time, we want you to consider some potential underlying factors. Maybe there's social, economic, environmental sort of root causes to the challenges or the successes that you spot. The setup is very similar to what we did last time. We'll break into our groups, we'll visit the dashboard, but here we're going to be looking at different challenges, different successes in the pages, and discussing, again, some of these root causes. We'll nominate one person, as we did before, to report findings back to the group. But if we're having active discussions, we may skip this step. We may just go right ahead and leave that precious time to our breakout room so that we can have rich conversations amongst one another. And what do I mean when I say country pages? Well, within the food systems dashboard, there's different ways of visualizing how national food systems are performing. You can see here on the left, there is a country profile, and here there's a bit of a scorecard on the left, a stoplight system, a traffic light color coding system to indicate food systems performance, where the country is doing well, where the country may have some issues within the food system. And on the right here, we have the breakdown of these 50 food systems countdown initiative indicators for the country. And you can click around in the region or income group to get some comparisons going. I'll quickly show you here what this looks like. Head to the food systems dashboard and click on country here. Perhaps we can select Indonesia. I go to the country profile, and I see this scorecard here on the left. And this gives me a snapshot of how the food system is doing, where those challenge areas are, and perhaps some of the areas that we can celebrate good outcomes in. I can click on these different indicators and also toggle the scorecard thresholds on and off to understand how Indonesia is doing in regards to the region or global performance. And then I can scroll all the way down and get a sense of some of the opportunities, some of the different actions that can be taken within the country and the desired impact from actions that were identified to be relevant for Indonesia. Similarly, in the FSCI country page, I can get this snapshot of performance across the 5 themes that we explored earlier. So I can scroll through them and kind of get a sense of how the country is doing. I can toggle income groups or regions, also compare it to other countries nearby or global performance. So I'll stop sharing my screen here and I'll put into the chat the links for this. But again, one of us will join you in your group and we'll make sure that you have those links at your fingertips there too. So I'm going to pass it to Elena here, who will break us into our groups, and we'll have about 15 minutes for this exercise. Fantastic. Welcome back, everyone. We have just a few minutes left in our session here, and we're really glad to have had this chance to introduce you to the Food Systems Dashboard and the Countdown Initiative, but this Learning Lab is a two-way street. So now we want to hear from you and get a sense of what you learned in this session, but also how you might be able to use these tools in the important work that you lead. So please join us in this reflection poll by scanning the QR code.
If the Menti is not working for you, you can also feel very welcome to also just put it in the chat.
Well, I don't know, but
yeah, Kingsley, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the tool is a useful thing for us to have a clear visualization of the progress so far. But my major concern about it is availability of data. And most importantly, when you look across the globe, it looks like some people have, others don't have. How do we bridge this challenge of data and paucity of data in the varied regions? And you could find that when it comes to dietary issues, I mean, especially for children, sometimes when you look at the European data, I mean, the developed north or the high-income countries, some of the information you may find that it's not there, where we are even expecting that they should have much data on their sites. You don't find some of these information. It may be also possible for us to learn as we just look at these indicators and how well things are going, to also learn of what is really working that well. I don't know if this gives that opportunity for kind of a cross analysis and possibly to see how well, I mean, to pick up some lessons in case of how well things are going. That's why we are getting better outcomes at different places.
Yes, thanks very much, Kingsley, for these reflections, concerns, and questions. These are really great points. And yet, this is also just an introductory session, so we don't have time to go into all of your questions. But do feel free to reach out to us. I think emails and contacts are shared, and all the links are open access. So do feel encouraged to reach out to us as a team. And we can always follow up as unfortunately the session we will need to close, but yeah, we'll go to some further reflections, and it's great here. We will also share the learnings from others on this, and we'll create some space to collect additional comments, concerns, reflections on this. So from your perspective, which indicators are crucial for understanding your food systems context? Maybe let's see if, yeah, let's see, maybe in interest of time, we'll just go to how do you think you might use the food systems dashboard and a food systems countdown initiative in your work or study? And then we have one other question on to leave any other comments, questions, etc. here. I see there are also several comments in the chat. And so we'll just take maybe 1 minute to see if people can still put some answers in here. Yeah. Looking at country-specific challenges and successes, review available data in different countries. Yeah, super. And we'll leave this Menti open also for further entries. And please also leave any other questions or comments. Please do put them in the chat. And I'll also put the next slide after this. You will see still on this the next slide for any other questions, comments. So you can also put them in here or feel welcome to reach out to the team. Yeah, in interest of time, I'll just give it back to Christina.
Thank you so much, Ro. So now our session's coming to a close. And as you've seen here today, the Food Systems Dashboard pulls data from all types of sources to give you a complete and holistic view. In addition to showing almost 300 indicators, it offers a bit of a matchmaking service between country challenges and potential opportunities. We like to call this the 3 Ds: describe, diagnose, and decide. And then the FSCI, the Countdown Initiative, this is a collaborative effort, an effort to monitor, fueling priority setting across different sectors, be it government policies, corporate and business practices, or NGO strategies. The overarching goal here is really to support the transformation of our food systems. As we wrap up, I want to take a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to all of you. Your insights, your questions, they've really added a layer of depth to this workshop. We genuinely hope that these platforms can be a valuable tool for your work and really help to streamline all your efforts in the realm of food systems. But remember, this conversation doesn't have to end here. Feel free to keep exploring the different platforms. Don't hesitate to reach out. Rebecca's dropped her email in the chat. So if you have any questions or need further clarification, do give us an email, drop us a message. And once again, thank you so much for your participation and your commitment to understanding and improving our food systems. Until next time, take care and keep up the great work. Thank you so much.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Big
Bye-bye.
applause. Thank you so
Bye,
much,
everyone.
facilitators. Really appreciate you taking the time to put together this very well organized session. I think we all learned a lot. I posted a link to our final learning lab that will be starting in about 30 minutes about crowdsourcing food prices with a new app. So if you're interested in learning in that, please join us in a half an hour and have a nice day, everyone.